This is From Courtroom to Carline, the podcast where we discuss life as a lawyer and a parent.
I'm Jenna.
And I'm Rick.
Your hosts and partners both in the courtroom and in parenting.
Join us as we navigate the fascinating worlds of law and family life.
Now, this is not legal advice, but in every episode, From Courtroom to Carline is a delightful blend of legal insight and parenting hilarity.
Get ready for a roller coaster ride where law meets love and where the gavel meets the Carline. Welcome to another episode of From Courtroom to Carline, a legal parenting podcast. Today on the show, we've got Graham Barber. He is a husband, father, and works with All Pro Dad, starting a new chapter here in the Tampa Bay area. So welcome to the show, Graham.
Welcome.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Why don't you educate our listeners on what All Pro Dad is?
There's a couple of different arms of All Pro Dad. We provide content, helpful parenting advice, daily fatherhood tips to several 100,000 subscribers every day throughout the nation. So we have an email blast that goes out every single day. It's called the Play of the Day. We have All Pro Dad Experiences, which are one-day events that happen at NFL stadiums, NCAA stadiums around the country, where we get dads and kids to have just a great fun time together on field. And then we have the All Pro Dad Chapter Program, which is our school chapter program, where I like to say we help schools create communities of intentional fathers.
That's great. And so how did you first become involved in All Pro Dad?
Really through a friend who was working with the organization at the time. I had previously worked with students in context of a church ministry atmosphere, and so had heard about All Pro Dad, and he kind of got me plugged in, and man, I've really enjoyed the working with schools and just seeing dads more actively involved with their families.
That's great. Now, so you're a dad. How many kids do you have, Graham?
So we have 8 kids.
Wow, 8 children. Okay. How old's the oldest one?
Yeah, so oldest is 10, about to be 11 next week.
Okay,
So,
all right.
Yeah, 11 scaling down all the way to 3.
8 kids, 10 and under.
Yep, you nailed it.
Give us, in a few words, what is the daily life like in your home?
It's fun, honestly. I mean, it's nuts. It's constant go. Everyone's kind of has a different schedule. We have some kids that are in public school, some that are homeschooled. So it's kind of a blended environment of, some are still waking up in their PJs and getting to a book. Some are, getting ready to get dropped off at school. Morning routine is typically breakfast, either getting to school or kind of rolling into the homeschool day. And then afternoons, we're into extracurriculars. So baseball, flag football, gymnastics, as I'm sure you guys enjoy also with your kiddos.
So how would you say All Pro Dad has helped you in your role as a dad to your own 8 children?
I tend to view fatherhood as kind of a spectrum. I think we see the absent father, which we hear a lot about. And sadly, in our schools and our communities, it's just something that has kind of plagued our communities. I think a lot of dads find themselves in that active space of like, man, I'm around and I'm working hard and I'm there for my kids. But it's almost like, what's the quality time that you're spending? If you're not creating that intentional time with your kids, you could go a week, a month, and you see them every day and you talk to them every day, but what's the depth of the relationship? Do you know the struggles or things they're going through at school or the difficulties they're having with their friend group? That takes intentionality. And that's one thing that working with All Pro Dad and being in that environment has really taught me. Is like, man, how am I being intentional with my kids?
And that's such a good topic, because being intentional with your time, that's a topic that we discussed on the last episode with Karis Campbell, where, she's a law firm owner. She has 7 employees. She has a 3-year-old, but she is intentional with her time. And the way she described it as how she makes sure that she's intentional is she goes week by week. So if she'll look at her calendar and see, hey, this week I spent a little more time at the office, so next week I'm going to be spending a little bit more time with my son, and sort of having that perspective of knowing when you're not being intentional so that you can sort of make that adjustment so that, like you said, what's going on at school, what their friends are doing, how they're how they're feeling and what's really going on in their mind. So being intentional with your time, and especially for you with 8 children, I mean, yes, you can be there, but you've got to figure out, how do I make the most out of my time with each child?
100%.
And how do you do that? Because I know for us, you can just kind of move through the motions, but what have you found that helps you kind of be intentional with each of your children?
It's been a work in progress, Jenna. Like like I said, I think I'm a very active and present parent, and I think I pride myself on that. And I think if you were to ask my kids, they Dad likes to have fun. He loves to be around. Like anything, even though we have I have a kind of a flexible hybrid work schedule, so I'm working in the home sometimes. It feels like Dad's always available, even though sometimes I'm not. Right? I think one thing that I've tried to implement this year that has produced a healthy connection with my kids, and hopefully I can sustain for a long time, is each month our kids get a day. Basically, or it's really just an hour of time. And I I was telling Rick, once I I tried to do it where every kid had a day of the week, and I just, it's like I couldn't deliver on it,
Yeah.
But each kid gets a day of the month, and like your friend you had interviewed, I try to schedule that day, far enough out where I can plan for it. And it's this last month our kids, I just put a bowl of different ideas, and they got to grab from it. So I might, try to change things up and maybe get some of their insights. But ice cream with Dad, or a coffee date, or create a playlist, something that we're engaging with together, and hopefully something that is ideally something surrounding their personal interests. Because I tell them all the time, I want to be invested in your interests.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's interesting you say that. So each year for their birthdays, we try to make sure that if it's a school day, we both take off. We keep that day just for them. And, one of them stayed home recently because they weren't feeling well. Well, our oldest was like, well, I want a day off too. And, he'll ask every so often. And I told him we will absolutely set that side of time. It's obviously something that it's stuck with him. He wants his day to be with us. And again, just being intentional and giving that time to them, I think, is just so important.
100%. Yep, couldn't agree more.
With All Pro Dad, where can, dads that want to sign up, how can they do that?
Definitely check us out, allprodad.com. Subscribe to our Play of the Day if you haven't already. It's just, like I said, it's the most widely read fatherhood email in the country.
Wow.
So we've got some great folks, some great partners, former NFL players and personalities that help write for our webpage. If your child goes to school, we have a school chapter program where dads can get on campus with their kids once per month for that intentional time. They get to tell their son or daughter they're proud of them and have a meaningful conversation. So that's something that I'm personally passionate about, and so we work with dads and school administrators to help create All Pro Dad chapters at individual schools.
And when we spoke previously, didn't you say that you were also involved in some of the curriculums at the schools that you partner with?
We produce our own curriculum.
Okay.
That we provide to schools. If educators are out there, the last thing they want to do is write another lesson plan, right? Yeah. So we really want to make our program really accessible. The school teacher, counselor, or the working dad who, hey, he's got one hour or 2 hours a month to be involved in the chapter meetings, but he might not have 5 hours to plan an entire event, right? So we've provided all that material for our dads, for our schools, so that they have a curriculum ready to go to impact their dads and kids.
So I also wanted to ask you, you seem like you're doing a great job, raising 8 children. How is the marriage? Do you feel like you guys have become stronger as a couple, grown together? Because I feel like with 3, it's tough to find that time together.
Yes.
With 8, I can only imagine. So how has that sort of affected the marriage?
She's the only person that would probably ever do this with me, and vice versa, if that makes sense,
Yes.
So we're kind of locked in. So I think whenever much like you guys, your professional aspirations and personal goals seem to be mutually aligned.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean it makes the marriage per se, but I think for Casey and I, certainly those personal passions are aligned in terms of standing in for the fatherless, and that's been something on our heart for a long time. I mean, sometimes we don't, to be honest with you. It's hard. I think there's some unity in the idea that we are united in our belief system and our passion together and our faith. But you do have to pick your spots. You do have to find time. You do have to create that. And she'll even get on to me. It's like, hey, you did your hour a month with the kids, where's my time? And so sometimes that's early mornings before the kids wake up for, a quick moment prayer before the kids wake up. But it's a work in progress, Rick, I'll be honest with you. Yeah.
It's funny. We just had, spring break, and it was Saturday night before, getting ready for the work week. And I just had a moment to reflect. We had such a great week with the kids. We both made sure that we took time off work, that we were, making sure that it was their time with us. And I remember, though, on Saturday, I was like, you know what? It would be nice to go out on a date night with Rick. So I said, hey, do you want to go out? And he said, yeah. So we have a couple trusted people that we turn to. Both were unavailable. So we ended up staying in. But Rick, it was so nice. He was like, well, that's the most effort you've tried in a while. I'm just glad that you tried to go out with me. But it was just, we didn't make it out, but it was just that, we wanted to go out. It didn't work. But, hey, that's what it is at this moment in our lives.
Absolutely. Different seasons where that will change. But you find creative ways to engage with each other, whether that's at a restaurant or in home, or that's good.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we even sometimes we try not to do too much TV with the kids, but there's just some nights that if we haven't been able to connect throughout the workday, we'll put a show on, we'll sit at the dinner table and just take that 30-40 minutes for us to be able to have a conversation. And that's what works for us right now. But it's working. So
yeah.
Well, you'll have to share with me more tips.
And that's also been, when we get asked the question, are you guys done? Are you going to have one more? My first reaction is no, because I want to get to that point where Jenna and I could, have that time together. And if you introduce another one, that just prolongs that ability to do so at this point, it would probably be another 4 years. And so that's probably the thought that pops into my mind more so than anything when we get asked that question of, are you guys done? So I want to ask you, obviously you talked about adoption. You and your wife have gone down that road. What sort of motivated you to kind of choose that path?
It was, I would say, never the goal. We became relative caregivers of some of our family members in 2015. So that was kind of our introduction into foster care. And our nephews were with us for 3 years. And so once they were reunified, that was a great thing, all good stuff. About 4 years after that, we had really felt like, hey, I think we're called to step into foster again. So, and the goal of fostering is to always reunify, right? And that's there's no greater picture of reconciliation to see a family reunified together.
Yes.
But sadly, that's not always how it works, So our goal was always to, or at least really appreciated in our training that was always hard. Like we're not coming in to save kids. We're here to restore families. If that is what can happen. Right. The goal changes, right? Based on a number of different circumstances. And when that changed for us, in some of our situations, that was something I think we made a decision on, that, hey, we'd be in it for the long haul. So we're still in that process.
Right. So you talk about fostering. That obviously came first, and that's such a good aspiration. Hey, the goal is to unify the families. Yeah. But that's got to be tough after you build that connection with those kids.
That's a pretty common thought, right? Of, man, you develop, and I hear people say all the time of like, oh, I could never do that because I would not be able to develop an attachment and then let go. And I would say sometimes I think that's kind of a cop out. Yes, there is a unique connection that you develop, and there can be situations where, from an individual's perspective, maybe the reunification feels uncomfortable because of certain factors that they may not agree with. It has been our experience, which we were able to reunify one of our boys. This is a little more than a year ago, and it was a great thing to celebrate,
Oh,
right?
good.
Even
Yeah.
though he had been part of our family for 7 or 8 months, we were able to develop a relationship with mom and dad, and they were just
Nice.
great individuals. So I guess I can't speak to the entire spectrum. So there are some challenges there. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor,
Yes.
even when the heart is attached,
Yes.
right? Even if there is a little bit of a heartbreak, I think there can be some beauty in the process for sure.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned, you still had that relationship with their biological mother or father, and I can imagine that that's got to be so important, for accomplishing the goal of unification. You don't want the foster parents to be at odds with the biological parents, or for there
Right.
to be resentment, on one side or the other. So, has that always been the case? That strong relationship with the parents until you get to the point where, you reunify, or
No, there's, I think, so many factors that are at play. Certainly in the position of the foster parent, it's generally not their role or position to coach, mentor the biological parent. Generally, there's, I mean, it's possible that there can be that type of relationship, and so it can be complex. Your resources and agencies that do their best to try to provide resources and also provide hope and opportunity in some dismal situations. So yes, it's never clean. I would say. I think it's also careful for someone in my wife's and I position to not be judgmental, right?
Yes.
And trust that even if there is some friction, which no doubt there would be if there's a fractured relationship, that it can heal.
Well, I'm definitely glad that we were able to discuss, your role as foster parents and taking on that, responsibility, and that just it's an awesome thing for you to do. I want to just shift real quick though to
Sure.
homeschooling.
Yeah.
So I went to public school, and I wouldn't necessarily say I had anything wrong with it. It was up north. I felt like I had a good education, but after having children, something clicked, right? And I'm like, is there a better way to do this? Is there something else to do? And real quick before I ask you a question, I remember, so our sons did baseball together a couple seasons ago.
Yeah.
And we ended up doing concession stand duty together, and you had your daughter in there. And I don't remember how old she was, maybe 8 or 9, possibly.
Sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. So I was in there, you were in there, and she was basically manning the whole concession stand, counting change. And I was like, wow, this is, really impressive. I don't know if my son could do this. How did you get into homeschooling?
I would take very little credit for that. It's really my wife's endeavor. And like a lot of families, I think 2020, created a lot of homeschooling, whether folks stayed there or not. That was a situation for us. It was something we just, and my wife wanted to continue on, and homeschool at the time was our 3 of our kids, which I think they were 6, 5, and 3.
Wow,
Although
yeah.
the 3-year-old was still in preschool. I'm getting fuzzy on
That's okay.
on the details, but
Understandable.
Yeah. Exactly. But man, I think what I would say, because I think there can be these sort of binary schools of thought of like, hey, if this is what's right for kids and this is what's wrong for kids. I think that's a poor approach. I think sometimes there's situations where homeschooling is possible, and it made sense for our kids and our family at the time. I don't know if we went into it thinking, I don't know if we can sustain it or if it will make sense long term, but let's see what happens and see if it works. I think it worked for our kids. They like being in the home. They like being around mom. They like the comfortability of, but hey, if I want to read more today than I did yesterday, then I can do that.
Right.
Our kids are really big, really strong readers, and my wife makes learning really exciting and fun. It's not just do whatever you want, but the kids just have a desire to learn. So I would say, and so like is two part, like, and homeschooling isn't what it was 20 years ago, where I was homeschooled for a period of time from like third grade to eighth grade, and then went to public high school. And there was, I think there's like a caricature of, the large family with, I don't know, maybe long dresses and,
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
Amish family.
Yeah,
or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
I think our kids have kind of had this blended experience of like educated at home, but very connected in a faith community and athletics, and so my daughter, for example, is not someone that is uncomfortable engaging with adults,
Yes.
and so yes, I would say we've had a rich benefit from that experience. Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if I'd want to homeschool by myself. I'd want it to be both of us. Obviously, that's just
Yes.
not doable.
Sure. Yeah.
But I remember when we had Wendy Meadows on. I had her as a life coach a few months ago now, and we had her on the podcast. And I remember in one of our sessions, because it kept getting brought up, I felt guilty of not homeschooling, and she said, "Well, why don't you take a day where you plan to homeschool the kids, keep them home?" And I said, "I already don't know that I don't want to do it, but it's like I want, I guess, the best for them, and I think that's what I struggle with. And I love the school they're going to, and I love that they're getting that faith taught to them and learning about Jesus that I don't know if I could necessarily give them because I didn't grow up that way. But I think, again, it's just that struggle of, am I doing the right thing? Are they where they're supposed to be? Is this where God's calling them? But I just need to have faith that, yes, this is where they're supposed to be at this moment. And if we end up homeschooling at some point, it will happen when it's supposed to.
And you'll never, we'll spend all our years parenting trying to figure out that answer.
Yes,
What's the best,
right?
right? And I think we like you said, we trust faithfully and make the best decisions we can. And it seems like you
Absolutely.
guys do that in many aspects of your life. So yeah, that's great.
We try.
So on that point, you give your wife a lot of the credit for the homeschooling, but obviously there's going to be days where she needs a break. I can only imagine if Jenna was at home just with our three boys, when I got home from work, I'm sure I would be, all right, my turn. I'm stepping in for the rest of the night, So what are some of the challenges that you face as a dad when, your wife is the one homeschooling?
For anyone, especially parents, I think we have to have, it's interesting because I think a lot of our personal joy and fulfillment is connected to doing things with our kids, right? It's not like you've had a hard day at work or just all week, Rick, you go off by yourself for 2 hours, or Jenna, you go, and that can be good, but sometimes it's like, oh, well, I actually I want to do something special with the kids. So it's almost, sometimes it's competing. But you do have to have things that kind of refill the tank. My wife has been really invested in her personal health, and she loves training for races, triathlons. That's something that she's really gotten into and done a couple 70.3 Ironmans. So
Wow.
yeah, she's a stud for sure. So like, and again, it's different seasons where sometimes she's training a lot. Sometimes she wants to take it slow and just, be at home more. And that's really satisfying for her. I think the best thing, Rick and Jenna, honestly, is, man, if the learning areas are set up for success every single day, that is very fulfilling for her, where, hey, we don't have to clean up to start, or we don't have to reset to start. That's beautiful. And in the occasional, getting her nails done and, things like that definitely fills the tank. Yeah.
So, one of the, things that I can only imagine is, being consistent with homeschooling. You think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you do it for a week and you're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know if I can continue on, much less do it for 12 years,
Right.
or,
Right.
So I think that's good. The fact that you guys have figured out the formula to not just, do it for a week, but just do it for the long term. So, because that's when it really becomes effective when they
Yes.
get older.
Right.
the fact that you stuck with it.
Yeah, and not being afraid to pivot if something's not working.
Yeah.
And in school, public or private school is not the best fit for kids. Sometimes homeschool is definitely not the right fit because there's they need to be, so I think every kid is different, and being willing to and open to approach that based on the needs of your kids is I think helpful.
And you talked about being intentional with your kids. You mentioned that, some are in, public school and some are homeschooled. So knowing which ones are more suited for homeschool, knowing which ones are more suited for public school, that only comes with, again, being intentional,
Yes.
learning what they're feeling and what their traits are. So, I think that's a good example of, finding the time to be intentional with these.
Yeah, totally agree. Yep.
So, Graham, are you reading any books, listening to any podcasts, watching any shows or documentaries that's just been of interest to you recently?
R.C. Sproul, who's, he's passed, but theologian that I really respect. So there's that. I would say I am definitely I am not a good consistent reader. It's an area where I need to improve because my kids are. It's like they're reading all the time, and so that's an area that I could use some improvement.
Me as well. So Jenna has our oldest in book club at
nice.
school. Yes, and this past book, Jenna tasked me with reading with him to make sure that he finished the book on time
And answer the questions.
Right.
and answer
right.
the questions. I did not pass that that exercise. I failed miserably. He did not finish the book and
no.
did not finish all the questions. So I think I'm in the same boat as you are. I need to kind of get maybe quicker with the reading.
Yes.
But also, he fights it.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to read.
Or so he likes to read. I think part of the problem is book club. You're required to read the book that book club's reading. I mean, if he could read comic books or about dragons all day, he would do that. But yeah, that's something that we're trying to get him to. But now I know that I need to be the one that does the book club books with him.
Yes.
Well, and I think it's like we try to be so practical with our time. I think sometimes there's an expectation or a decision I'm making when reading a book that this is going to reap some sort of tangible benefit for my life rather than doing it for personal enjoyment and just creatively engaging with someone else's work and exploring that. So yeah, it's sometimes cutting out what am I going to get from this? It is, I think, helpful.
Yeah, the pizza party every month.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, oh, sure. Well, yeah. That's good, right? Yeah, let's celebrate. Maybe adults need their own AR test.
Yeah. But I think too, like for me, because obviously, they go to school and then they come home. I don't want to make him feel like he has to do homework, because he is very creative with his hands. So he likes to build. He likes to do those things, and I don't want to take that away from him, right? That's his time to do whatever he wants, where he's, been in school and he has to do what they tell him. So I think that's also where we struggle with in terms of forcing them to do their homework.
Right.
And not just reading, but getting him to comprehend it. Because a lot of times we've noticed that he'll read just to get through it and not retain any of the information. So like you said, if you're having them read something that they can get some sort of value, for their life and apply, you're not going to get that if you're just reading to get through it. So that's also been, I think, a challenge, and which is the point of the questions.
Right. So. Read a page, then draw a picture. And I was like, oh, that's good. Or
yes,
mentally draw the picture.
Yeah,
it's like I should practice that too.
So Graham, thank you for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
We admire what you're doing.
Absolutely.
With All Pro Dad and raising a family of 8, so, and a healthy marriage as well. So you're definitely one that we look up to. So thank you for coming on the show and talking about everything.
Thank you for what you guys do, and I'll see you at the ball field.
Yes, absolutely. And stay tuned because we still have another segment of What Happened to Florida Man. Welcome back. So for this segment on what happened to Florida man, we've got a gentleman who was arrested for trespassing. And the reason he was arrested for trespassing is because in the early morning hours, about 6, 7 o'clock a.m., a family with children woke up to the sound of pounding on their roof. And so when they went outside to investigate, they found this man howling like a wolf at the moon. And so the police were quickly called, and he was taken into custody, arrested for trespassing.
Where was this from?
And this was in Indian River County. So in Indian River County, this gentleman was howling at the moon in the early morning hours, arrested for trespassing. So what happened to this gentleman? Well, he was placed on probation, but quickly violated probation because he tested positive for an illegal substance, which might have contributed to the initial arrest. Unfortunately for this gentleman, he did pass away while on probation. And so I will say that, in a lot of these cases where, someone's addicted to, illegal substances, not only does it, cause them to, get arrested, but, there's so many stories out there that they actually overdose or pass away because of it. And the statistics are shocking when you think of how many people tragically pass because of addictions and overdoses. And so, the only thing that, we can sort of counsel our clients on, when we get these, cases that involve drugs is, hey, just because the case might be over, you still have to change your lifestyle, or else you're going to be calling me again, or worse, your family's going to get a phone call from the hospital.
I think one of the things that we consistently hear is, changing people, places, and things. And it may sound redundant and, we hear that, but I will honestly say that we have had clients that have changed people, places, and things and have done much better and have been able to turn their life around.
Yes. And to see those success stories is very rewarding, especially with what we do. And again, just yesterday, we had a client graduate from drug court. He gets a round of applause, and the bailiff presented him the coin and shared that his own son had passed from addiction and overdose. So when you hear those stories, it's hard not to be moved and inspired to want to change, affect that change for your clients. Well, that's been another episode of From Courtroom to Carline, a legal parenting podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode.